Hi, Gem. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, your name, Gem, is not one I hear very often. Where's it from?
So, my dad, my mom was going to name me Jane,
Mm.
but my dad took one look at me and said, "What a gem."
Oh,
I know, right? And so they decided to name me Gem, which I'm really grateful for. It feels like a blessing.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's so sweet.
Isn't it sweet? I know it's kind of corny, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your life.
Well, let's see. So I've been married for 36 years to my husband, Alan. We have three grown sons. They are 23, 26, and 29. And I am delightfully a part of a nonprofit that my husband and I started about 6 years ago. It's called Unhurried Living. And that is what I spend a lot of my time on now. We train Christian leaders in the unhurried way of Jesus. And I have a special focus as well on women. I'm a life coach. I coach women at the intersection, basically, of spiritual leadership and soul care. And so I just do all of the things that you guys are doing. I have a podcast and we have courses and I write books. I mean, all the fun things. So, yeah.
And you have children as well.
Yeah, three grown sons.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I have a house full of men at one point, not anymore. Everyone's kind of, but a husband, three sons. My dog is even a boy. So I'm always looking for some estrogen.
So are you in California? Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, I'm
Yeah.
in Southern California. Yeah.
So you're also super fortunate in that you get to be by the beach and it's
Yes.
always 70 degrees.
Essentially, that's true. Yeah.
Those of us who are not sitting in 70-degree weather right now are feeling a little jealous.
Yeah, right now it's blue skies with a couple of clouds and it's just sunny and beautiful. So yeah,
Like every day.
pretty much. We had some great rain though
Good.
over the holidays, which we need here because we are a
Mhm.
desert.
Mhm.
So
Well, as you know, we are in a healthy way series, and today we're talking about change. And we have been collectively, humankind has been in a whirlwind of change over the past couple of years. And so um, that's an interesting piece of this, but also change is actually one of the only things that's constant in our lives because things always change as much as we want them to stay the same. The past is not the present, and there is change that happens. And so just let's enter in a little bit to this topic and talk about why is change a challenge? Because we start out in life embracing change, and then as we grow, we start resisting change. And so, what is it that happens in that transition?
yeah, well, let me say this first of all. I actually love the topic of change and maybe synonymously transformation. And maybe another word we could use is process. I really love that. And I think sometimes we resist change because we don't have a vision for this beautiful process that God has us in over the course of our entire life. So like you're saying, kind of the first half of life, we're like, let's change. We're young, we have got energy, we've got ideas, right? And then as we move along, I think we get tired. And it's hard to have a vision for what could be. But I think of the verse from Philippians, I think it's 1:6, right? He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Now, embedded within that verse really is the idea of change, isn't it? Growth minimally. So maybe we have a hard time with it because we're not connected into this beautiful invitation to respond to the invitations of God over the lifetime. Again, we're using the word change here, but can we also use synonymously grow, mature, transform? Maybe those words are a little more easy to digest. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, it's interesting because we have 5 core values at the sisterhood, and one of them is growth.
Hmm.
And so we really do believe that we all have opportunities and areas to grow. And what I'm hearing you talk about is the personal process in that. And what I heard Krista say about resisting change, I think for a lot of women, it has to do with the external. Like, I don't want the external circumstances to change because I'm afraid of them. And you're reminding us that the internal process of change can be growth in response to them.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. Sorry if I misunderstood the actual point, but I do see.
No, but I think we hear a word like that and we all translate it, interpret it in different ways, but it's multifaceted, is what you're pointing out.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you're raising a good point here. There really, because there are at least two ways change can happen, right? Something happens outside of us that changes, and we have to deal with that. And then there's also the kind of change that we are engaging in our own life. And that's kind of two different conversations that we could have. Right?
Mhm.
And yet they hold hands to
Yes.
me. They hold
Yeah.
hands with one another because
Yeah.
often that external change leads to really deep internal change because it dislodges us from our comfort zone. And whenever we step out of that comfort zone, that's usually where we start to go deeper. So maybe talk a little bit about that, about how often we are resisting those external changes. And sometimes we choose them and sometimes we don't. I mean, I think about several friends right now who are in the midst of changes they did not choose and they would not choose.
Right.
And yet they are forced to now deal with the reality of this changed life. So talk about that.
Yeah, it is. It is difficult when a circumstance happens that no one wants, no one asked for. And all of the pain and the issues that arise because of that. So I guess that's where the holding hands piece really comes in, right? Because when something is happening out here outside of our control, um, there are pivots and shifts that we have to do in here to deal with it. And so one of the things, and I feel like I say this to women all the time, is um, there's got to be a little bit of a lowering of expectations, at least up front. Like, we expect ourselves to be super women all the time. And so all this stuff that's happening, we could just relax all of the sort of the control or the to-dos that we think we have to keep doing as that is happening. You know what I mean? Like, this terrible thing is happening, and yet I'm still trying to keep up with all the things I'm doing. I guess what I'm really saying is give yourself a break. Just give yourself a break. It's okay to step back from it because this thing is actually occurring and you are going to have to make some adjustments. Give yourself some space and grace to do so. And kind of once you're in that position, then this change that we're going to kind of be doing inside of us, we also don't have to manhandle that, right? What is God? That's why I like these kinds of questions. What is God inviting you to right now? Right? I love those kind of words. It's more of a process question. And I think when we're in that place of change, really, I think the first thing, it actually has to do with love, right? How deeply could I engage God's love right now to uphold me while I make my way through this terrible thing?
Wow.
Yeah.
I was remembering a situation, and I've had a few situations in my life where circumstances have come, boom, and I haven't been able to mentally adjust. And I've had this weird response of like wanting to continue with life as normal.
Yeah.
So one thing was, a year ago, my husband started to have a seizure at the grocery store. And when we got him all stabilized and he left the building, I went and stood in line with my groceries. And it was like, my brain was thinking, I'm here to buy groceries and we need food for dinner. And it wasn't until I saw the people's responses around me looking at me like, what are you doing? Because it had caused a big scene in the store.
Oh.
And then the manager said, why don't you just take the groceries? You don't need to pay for them. Like we're going to help you adjust. And I'm thinking of one of our friends right now who's going through a super hard time. And how do we help release people of those expectations? Because I think you're right that as women, we just are like, this is my plan. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
And we don't even know that we need to let go.
Right.
And not send our kids to school, or
Right.
not do the laundry on Wednesday,
Right.
or whatever the plan was. How do we help each other in that?
Yeah.
Because sometimes the outside people can see it when we can't see it.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And I mean, when someone is in the throes of a surprising change, something that's happening, really, I mean, isn't the first thing you're just hunkering down and getting through it, aren't you? I mean, no one is in their fully right mind in those initial stages of whatever small t trauma or big T trauma is happening.
Mhm.
And so I think that's where the grace comes. And we can, if we are even aware enough of that to go, okay, I have to be honest. So maybe I should tell a story. In 13 years ago, maybe, I had a severe, um, it was called a disc extrusion. It was in my lower back and it was um, bone on nerve. Okay, now I've had 3 cesareans. Nerve pain is another thing that I did not know exists. It was the worst. I just didn't know. I had no idea. So it was this pain that would start in my lower back. It went down all the way down my left leg. And there's these points, these pressure points in your glute, in your hamstring, in your calf, in your heel. And it was just this pulsing nerve pain. When that was happening in the first month, trying to even figure out what it was, and I was just surviving the pain, I wasn't having any of these thoughts, right? I
Mhm.
was just in pain, trying to get through every day. My world became very small. Fortunately, at that time, my husband has always had a home office because we've worked sort of in the nonprofit world. He was caring for the boys. I laid in my bed. And I'm not telling you I had any epiphanies or I wasn't like thinking about the love of God necessarily. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? When you're in the initial throes, it's just you're hunkered down. And I think that's okay. Because what else are you going to do? You do your best. You do your best in the moment. And I think what you were saying, Alex, is how can we help each other? So, during that time, we had friends who came in. I had a friend who came in and cleaned the house, and just other friends who would talk to me here and there. But after is what I want to aim at here. So, in the initial stages, I was hunkered down. It was a terrible story, but it eventually started to heal. Months later, I was then able to go back and reflect on what happened. And then I crafted a story that included the grace of God and how he met me in it. But when I was in the throes of it, I was only just getting by moment by moment. You guys have that same experience?
Well, it's interesting because I just read a post from someone the other day who said, a friend was speaking to her and the friend said, you don't have to do this season well. You just have to survive it and you will. And I thought it's a beautiful thing to say to someone who's in the midst of that. And I was also thinking how you had physical pain, but sometimes that pain that you're describing is just emotional. And so you actually, like, you probably had a hard time walking or had a hard time, like, right, functioning physically. But I think about when something happens emotionally that takes us out, we're having that same raw pain. You just can't see it physically as much. And so then we feel like our physical bodies have to keep doing the same things that we've always done, like checking out at the grocery store. That's such a great example. And yet, like, there's that emotional pain inside happening. And so we don't allow those to adjust a little bit, and I'm not saying we want to go and just stay in bed all day, because there may be days for that, but if you do that day after day after day, that's going to lead to its own issues, and problems. We have to have those healthy things that we're doing with our physical bodies when our emotional side is offline. So I guess my question would be this: in change, and as we are, whether it's like that deep emotional or something physically, like a cancer diagnosis or something like that has happened that has caused the change, how do we learn to bring God into that space differently? How do we welcome God? How do we welcome that space of transformation, as you were describing earlier, regardless of what the change is and whether it's a big T or little t trauma?
Yeah. So I think, are you talking about when we're in the initial stages or any place along that whole journey? How are we connecting with
Yeah,
God?
I think just even that sense of, I think people are longing for the comfort of
Yeah.
God in pain. So
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
it could be a mom who's saying goodbye to her child who's leaving for college, and that's holding its own sense of loss and pain and change.
Yeah.
Or, right, regardless, or someone just lost their job. I mean, COVID and that whole situation. And, now life as I've known it is gone. And so, how do we allow God into those spaces differently so that then God can meet us there and offer that comfort?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I think one word comes to mind, and it's the word with. And I think in these kind of situations, that word and that idea has a chance to really, really deepen. Because when we're suffering this much, we're well beyond just intellectual assent to things that we believe about God, right? You're talking about the rubber meeting the road here. How do I connect with God when I'm in pain? And this is all I can sense right now. And for sure, I am not providing any easy answer to that, that mystery. But I just wonder if tucked in there somewhere is a deeper journey into God with us. We just came through Christmas, right? And Emmanuel is the word of that month. God with us, Jesus embodied. He came down here and lived as a man and suffered greatly in ways we could never imagine. And when we are suffering, it is time for us to embrace that aspect of God. Jesus embodied, Jesus, the whole Christmas story, right? The death, the burial, the waiting on Saturday. I'm sorry, now I'm in Easter. I jumped from Christmas to Easter. Sorry about that. Um, take your pick, actually, Advent or Easter. Both of them are about Jesus coming to earth as a baby, living, and then his whole story. My point is, can we walk with the suffering Christ? How could Jesus meet me in my pain? And I know that normally, for example, when I was in that much pain, I'm asked, my prayer is, get me out of here. Make this go away right now. But sometimes things last a really long time. And so, what does with, and that's even a question you can ask yourself out loud in prayer now, what does with look like for me right now? And I think God is very creative, and something would come to mind. And even if it doesn't come to mind, it's possible that God would provide an answer to that question for you. What does with look like? What does with feel like for me right now? And again, because we're talking about suffering and pain and change that we didn't ask for, it's time Alex, you had this hand open motion earlier. It really is a time to open your hands and receive God maybe in a new way.
I'm thinking about how we often fight against what's happening.
Yeah.
I've used the word resistance, but we could use fight. Another word, we just like fight it. We fight the change. We fight the experience. We fight whatever it is because we don't want to accept it. And so in some ways, that is blocking our transformative process because we're just refusing to allow it. So can you explain the difference between grit? Because I think we all want to have grit in our lives, and we want to be resilient, but also kind of resisting and fighting in a way that actually sets us back.
Yeah. Yeah, acceptance is kind of a tough one because sometimes we think it means, resignation or giving up or condoning or something. I accept it. But acceptance really is just um, what is happening right now. Just acknowledging what's actually happening and accept. Now, that is one way to ease up from the resistance because it's the resistance that really adds another couple pounds of weight on the end of our barbell. When we resist, because now you've got expectations that are dashed and more anxiety and more stress added on to the already difficult situation. So a good step is to just kind of neutrally let yourself see what's happening and acknowledge it. And that's good enough acceptance for now, right? You're not like, oh, I love this pain. No, no one's asking you to do anything with that. Just like, here it is. And then once you see what's actually happening, then you might be able to make your way forward one step at a time, right?
I had a therapist say it this way once, and I thought it was so helpful. And he said, we're often grabbing onto something, white knuckling something, or we've got our hand up. So if you can see on video, we've got our hand up resisting. And so either way, we've got kind of these like pushing out motions. He said, what if instead we take our arms and we just open up? And we literally just like open our hands and we open up our arms and we just accept what is. And then we find the grit and resilience with God, inviting God into the space of what is. And then we find that grit and resilience within what is. And it makes it healthy, right? It makes it healthy
right.
Instead of this fighting, which actually kind of mentally throws us off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that open-handed, open posture is just really important, right? This open-hearted, and I think here's what I was going to say. When we have that posture and there's that openness and the lack of the pushing, then I think there's a chance for sort of a God-initiated response to come up from within us. Because some of the pressure here is that we think we have to do something about everything. And that's fine. We probably have ideas for how to do everything, but sometimes we're out beyond our own limitations. And so the releasing, there's a chance then for this God-given, beautiful energy to come up from within us and maybe offer another idea or another kind of strength that we never knew we had could emerge, right? And all of this push me, pull you stuff sometimes either numbs us from it or I don't know if it delays it. I don't know, but something happens there.
Mm-hmm. Because when we're looking at what is, we're looking at what is true.
Yeah.
And then we can remember what is also true.
Yeah.
That God is with us, that God has not changed, that God does love us. And so that accepting what is about looking at and facing the truth. And the truth isn't always all bad. Right. The truth about God hasn't changed, though our circumstances have, the truth of our circumstances have. So being able to also hold more than one thing at once is part of those open arms to say, I'm accepting all of it as what is. Maybe I don't like it. And like you said, it's not endorsement, but I'm recognizing the truth of the change in this moment.
Yes, that's so good. That's so good. There are, I have some patterns in my book, What Does Your Soul Love? And there's this process called the process of transformation. And the first three parts of it I called um, the posture of transformation. And it's three letters. It's OAW. And the first O is for open. We've been talking about open. So to me, if you're in the beginnings of something and you want to change, but you don't know how, no matter whether it's any kind of level of circumstance, we don't have to just be talking to people who are in severe trauma right now. Anywhere you are in your life right now, and you want to be making some kind of change, start with asking yourself if you're open. Am I open to change? Am I open to change in general? Am I open to that big process I was talking about earlier? That's kind of the cosmic version of it. But in this particular situation in which I find myself right now, am I open to what God has for me? Right. Once you've asked yourself if you're open, then you can start being more aware. So that's the second letter, OAW, aware. And aware is about noticing what's happening right now. Just get aware of the actual circumstances and come to terms with them. Like you said, what's the truth of what's happening right now? Whether or not I like it or not, don't worry about that. Just what's happening. And grow to become a person who's not only open, but now is watching, noticing. And then the W stands for willing. Once you're open to change and you are aware of what's going on around you, are you willing to do something healthy about that? Hopefully under the guidance of the Spirit, guiding you into what's best for you, what's best for the people around you. So open, aware, and willing is a nice little thing you can turn to just check in with yourself in general, but also in any specific situation.
I'm curious if there's, of those three, does there tend to be one that's a bigger sticking point for women? Because I have one in my mind that I think,
I would love to hear.
Yeah, what's yours, Alex? Share it.
Yeah.
Willing. Like, I feel like I'm pretty good at being like, okay, I'm observing. I'm aware of what's going on. I want to know what's happening because that helps my sense of
Right.
planning, security, maybe false sense of security. But then I know that if I'm being asked to do something hard, I'm already feeling that sense of resistance, of willingness before I even know what I'm being asked to do, because I'm afraid that it's going to be hard.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I wonder if it just depends on the person.
Right.
You know, because I've had people tell me that, because I was offering it as a kind of in order thing, but it does, you know how things are. We talk about things linearly, but they twist around. I've had some people say to me that they felt willing, but they didn't know how to be aware. Like, I'll do whatever it is, but I don't know what it is. Do you know what I mean? So I think it depends on the person or the circumstance, but I certainly hear you. Like, if this is going to be hard, I don't know if I'm up for that. But see, that's when you go back. I like, this is the last three of the 9, because there's 3 sets of 3. The last 3 are SSG, which is small, simple, and gracious. So see if you find yourself like you want to be willing, right? But you're not quite sure because it might be hard. That's when you want to take whatever that is that you can see that God might be inviting you to. And God's in no rush. Just break it down into the smallest possible step and just do that one. Sometimes I think we get overwhelmed because we might even be able to see the answer and then we know what it means and then we're like, oh no.
Yes, that
right?
what you just said.
Oh no. And the older we get, the more we know what it really means. And so we can completely overwhelm ourselves with how much there is to do here. But I've just grown in my conviction that God has all the time in the world, that God is very gracious, and God knows us, knows our limitations, and it's okay to break it down. There's a famous, I can't remember the name of the guy. It's one of those famous kind of like Desert Father kind of people. He said, don't pray as you can't, pray as you can. Now he was talking about prayer, but I'm talking about now just in life. Whatever it is you're coming upon, don't do it as you can't, do it as you can. Which means I can see the whole thing, but I can only do this one step. So that's what I'm going to choose to do for now. And I'm only going to take the next one when I'm ready. And there's a lot of grace in there to engage the process.
I think that's an interesting point because I also hear a lot of people saying it's too late. It's too late to
Mhm.
change.
Yeah.
I'm down this road too far. I'm too old. I don't, whatever, right? I'm too fill in the blank.
Right.
And can you talk about that a little bit and how you've helped people maybe reach over some of those obstacles of feeling like, well, I've been in the same space for 25 years now, and so it's the way it is.
Yeah. Well, I'm a natural optimist. So, I mean, I know it's easy for me to wax eloquent about this because I tend toward seeing options and I tend toward wanting to move forward and reach. I love ideating. So I understand that. I still think no matter what your wiring is, it's never too late. It's never too late. I mean, what is like the core of all we believe in, right? The gospel itself, the good news. Um, that old fashioned word everyone used to use, and yeah, maybe repent. And that just means turn, right? You get to turn, you get to change. So, from the very beginning of the invitation that draws us into this life with Christ, we're invited to this. So, um, if you are a person who thinks it's too late, I just want to say it's not. And even though it might feel like it, um, God has an endless supply and variety of ways that you could grow and mature and lean in deeper into anything you already know, let alone anything new that He might have for you. So I would say, whatever it takes to, and this is a hard one. I was going to say, pull yourself up out of hopelessness. I know that's usually impossible because when you're hopeless, by definition, you're hopeless. But
Mhm.
if you're hearing this podcast and you find yourself in that hopeless place, I hope you'll borrow from us the hope that it's never too late. You can move to another place if you want to.
I'm hearing two things in what you said. One is that we have agency.
Yeah.
God gives us free will.
Yeah.
So we can say, I'm going to choose to make a change, which sometimes that doesn't change our circumstances,
Right.
but it's what we're controlling what we can control, and that God has given us agency. That's how He made us. And the second is being willing to be surprised by how that change happens, because maybe the too late narrative is for it to happen in this way. And I was just talking to somebody yesterday who said, this is an answer to prayer for me, but I didn't know to pray for it to play out in this way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so to be willing to be surprised in how God answers that prayer or that desire for change, it may be different than how we have imagined it. And maybe the way we have imagined it isn't going to happen in our lifetime. But if the deeper desire is articulated, that God might be able to meet that desire in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're back to that open, aware, and willing then thing, aren't we? Yeah. How open are you? And when in the aware part, are you open and aware or noticing? Another word you can use is notice. Are you open and noticing what God might be doing that doesn't fit into whatever parameters you've got all set up?
Mhm.
And again, if we're talking about the second half of life, for sure that's going to happen a lot because that's what this part is about. In our first half of life, we build this beautiful structure. We have energy and we're making, the ego is in play and we're making our life and we're choosing these things and we're building. And that's good. This is what everybody does in the first half of life. And then, you move into midlife and it's the great undoing. What is happening? I don't know. Nothing works the way I thought it was going to work anymore. And I have all these questions and mystery comes in. Don't know if you like mystery because you can't control that. I mean, midlife, but ideally, if you can just hang on through that whole process, when you get to the second half of life, there's just this, it's just the way it is. God is bigger than I know. I can never wrap my arms around anything he's doing. In a way, then I can let myself be on a grand adventure of surprise as I remain open to the way he wants to do things. And then it can turn into joy at some point, right? Because now you're accustomed to this pattern of letting go and not knowing and embracing um, God's gift to you.
Mhm.
That's a great word. Really good word. And may we all move toward it. I think it's just my sentiment right there is may we all get to that place where we can just say, this is an adventure. I'm on a transformative journey. And this is not only like, this is great. Like this is full of joy. And
Yeah.
sure, it's not always happy, but I'm full of joy because I am with God, sensing God and on this journey with him.
Yes.
And that's hopeful,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
of God, it's hopeful.
That's right.
As we are closing today, what are just some words of encouragement you have for women, no matter where they're at,
Yeah.
as we're working toward health this year?
Yeah. I would say if you're seeking a healthy life with God this year, um, hmm, knowing where we've been these last 2 years and knowing I talked to a lot of women individually, maybe one phrase would be give yourself a break. And I mean that in every possible way, like give yourself a break for real. Like the intensity with which we live our lives and this idea of pushing, trying, and angsting, you know, this terrible unholy trio of things that drive us, you know, give yourself a break. Everything doesn't have to happen in this very moment. Um, things could be allowed to take time. And so give yourself a break, like just existentially, but also literally give yourself a break. What would it take for you to have 5 minutes here or there where you just go outside and look at a bird in the backyard and take a few deep breaths? Or what if you got some childcare, you swap with a girlfriend and you both gave each other a couple of hours where you got to just go somewhere beautiful, walk around with no technology in your hand and just ask God some of these questions you and we've even been talking about in this last hour or whatever. Um, assess if you're open, aware, and willing. So I said, give yourself a break, right? So give yourself a break, ease up, and then give yourself an actual break. Get some time with God.
Thank you, Gem. Those are great words to end on today. Really appreciate it. And as you said, you have a book out called Unhurried Living. That would be a great resource for people. And where else can they find you?
Yeah, so my book is actually called What Does Your Soul Love?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
We're gonna
that's okay.
we will just cut that right out of the podcast.
That's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
Gem, why don't you tell people what resources you have and where they can find you?
Okay. Yeah. So you can find us at unhurriedliving.com. My most recent book is called What Does Your Soul Love? It's 8 questions that reveal God's work in you. And this process of transformation that I described is in there. But the heartbeat of the book are 8 questions that you can ask yourself if you do want to make progress to change. So it's about change. So the other place you can find me is Instagram. My name, Gem Fadling. I always love to connect with women on there, so come and follow me there. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, great. All right. Well, have a wonderful year ahead. And thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, guys. It was wonderful to be with you.
Bye.
Bye.